The conversation you're about to hear may not be the best quality, but we do feel that the content is worth it. So please bear with us as you listen. Hi, I'm Pamela Wallin, and welcome to another edition of No Nonsense. Today we're talking women and entrepreneurship. A little bit later on, you'll meet Prabha Mitchell, who is the CEO of Women Entrepreneurs of Saskatchewan. But first, a young woman entrepreneur, Saskatoon-based. Her company is called Road Coffee, and it was a little bit of a road to get to this place and time. Alisha, Esmail, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you reaching out.
This is terrific. Okay, your story, a young girl, your parents were born in Tanzania. They ended up in Saskatoon, and read or hear something about you that you've had some kind of obsession with coffee since you were a little girl. What's that about?
Yeah, I really have. Even going to school here in Saskatoon and Draude High School, when I had breaks or a spare, during that time, I would go check out a coffee shop or make a run through a drive-through and grab a coffee. And, back then it was lots of doubles.
Right.
And then as time has gone on, I just got more into coffee and started learning about where it comes from, the process. You often found me in a bookstore in the coffee and drink section trying to learn about the history. And then as I started traveling, that obsession just kind of took over, and I went and found some real coffee farmers and tea farmers and started learning directly from them.
So you started your professional life or your working life in international development, NGOs, running around Central and South America, Africa, doing good works. Water security, food security, those kinds of issues. So how at what point did that transition happen?
Well, I think it started just getting to know people on the ground. I would spend a number of months in one location. And during that time, whether it was Haiti or Nepal, South Africa, I would go seek out these farmers, tea farmers, coffee farmers, lots of local small entrepreneurs in these locations, and I'd learn about their process and their lifestyle. And of course, coming from Canada, growing up in Saskatchewan, we were so blessed and privileged to have access to the resources we have. And so seeing these people having to work, 4 times as hard as I would have to work, but then seeing
on
that their supply chains
I'm saying on a farm that's the size of our front yard, not anything that we can imagine here, which is acres and acres.
Exactly, right. So it was a little bit of a mind trip for me, seeing their kids and how they would struggle to, just put clothes on their back or food on the table. And then, in the same breath, but also the most selfless people, they'll feed you and cook this really nice meal for you, knowing that they wouldn't eat maybe for the next few days.
Mm-hmm.
It just broke my heart. And so, then I come back here to the West, and first thing I do is spend $5-7 on a coffee. So I'm sure you can imagine that disconnect starting to grow.
Exactly.
More friction. Exactly, right? So that's kind of when I decided to move back to Saskatchewan and try and make a difference for some of those coffee farmers.
So how are you doing that exactly?
So we're doing that in a few different ways. I often say that the best kept secret in our industry is that coffee farmers don't get paid above cost of goods. And so, anybody in business knows you're not going to charge less for your product than it costs to make it. That's business 101, right? And so what we do is we come alongside coffee farmers and we're teaching them skills through our partners on the ground to properly understand their business, properly understand what their cost of goods are. And then we also try and make sure we're paying them above those cost of goods. So if it costs $1.75 per pound US, we're making sure we're paying them, $2.25 at least, or $3 for that pound of coffee. Whereas our industry standard might be 90 cents or $1.30 if it's certified under some of the regular certifications. They're still getting paid below cost of goods. So we're coming in, we're paying farmers above cost of goods, We're working with them to equip them in their skills and their education. And then this last year, we actually launched a microloan program because coffee farmers don't have access to finances.
Always the case in these kinds of developing countries, right?
That's right, exactly. And they're able to use these microloans to purchase equipment, to help with harvest, or just get through the day-to-day work. We've had a really successful project from this last year go through, and their coffee recently arrived in Canada during this pandemic season, and we'll be launching it right away here, actually, for people to enjoy.
And have you, how do you sell? Have you got storefronts? Are you just supplying coffee beans or ground coffee to people who buy? Like, what's your, how big are you at this point?
There's a few different avenues. So right now we're supplying cafes and restaurants across Saskatchewan. We have an amazing corporate program. So we're working with tech companies across the province, the airport to engineering firms. We have an amazing corporate program. If you're out and about, you're often going to be seeing our coffee. And then we'll also have our website online that supplies coffee directly to your door. So we're selling to individuals as well as we have this home subscription service, so you can never miss a cup through our online subscription.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about the actual entrepreneurship and where that comes from, because having done it myself, I know it's always a mix of things. You have to have mentors, you have to have passion, and then in my life, certainly, I'm sure it's true in yours, serendipity always plays a role. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
For sure. I think coming from the nonprofit world into the business world was definitely a challenging shift, especially because in the nonprofit world, you're constantly giving, like you give the shirt off your back for someone. And there's a lot of those same values that I've tried to build into Road Coffee, but it was challenging to also have like stern things in place to make sure, we're constantly growing and moving forward. And I've had some really key mentors around me and an amazing business coach that's helped me with that. I think in my first year of business, one of my mentors told me multiple times, you're not running a nonprofit, you're running a for-profit company.
You have to take in more than you give out, right?
That's right.
Do you have a daily relationship with them?
Yes, I do. I try and keep people I look up to and respect close to me. And when I'm making big decisions, I usually run it past them. I think like one of my struggles that I've had over the years, and I've often seen in some of my peers, is I call it the ego monster. Like especially when you have big vision and you want to do big things, sometimes our ego can get in the way. And so luckily, the mentors I have around me aren't afraid to challenge me when I'm going to make an ego-based decision versus something I really want to do. And, for me, one of those things was I thought I wanted a cafe storefront, even though it wasn't necessarily in line with the vision I had. And I was pretty set on it. And one of my mentors just kind of called me out one day and was like, do you want that because of your ego or because it actually fits in with your vision? And, I'm glad he did, because we've really been able to make more of an impact, and we've been able to actually accomplish the things I set out to do.
We all need people who will speak truth to power, right? Who will give you a shake and say, get your ego out of the way. And is it because you come from that NGO doing good kind of background, is it harder or easier to hear that?
I think it's easier. I think I'm pretty strong-willed sometimes, so sometimes I don't want to hear it right away. But I know these people have my best in mind, and so I try and filter everything I hear through that lens. On the other side, though, I often find being in business that everybody has an opinion on your business and how you should run it. And so I've had to learn who to take advice from. That's been an interesting challenge as well.
And what leads you in one direction or another? Is it just your gut?
I go off my gut a lot. I was thinking about that this morning. I am driven by gut, but I'm also driven by data and results. I'm a big implicational thinking person. My staff will tell you I talk about that a lot, but really thinking through situations and calculating the potential outcomes and then trying to make the best decision. But sometimes, I made a decision during COVID when we were having to pivot and change some things up. I made a gut decision that didn't make sense logically, but I couldn't shake the feeling. And I'm still not sure what that's going to look like long term, but I'm just trusting my intuition and we'll see how the cards lay.
Well, you only learn by doing, right? That's the process. That's the entrepreneurial process as well, is making mistakes is sometimes the best teacher.
That's true. Sometimes a little painful in the process, but usually in the long run, it works out good.
So what do you think you have changed in the world, the life of the people that you deal with, the suppliers, the growers of the coffee, and what do you think you've changed here in Saskatchewan?
Well, that's a good question. I think with our farmers, we're making an impact in their day-to-day lives. With this last microloan project, it was really cool to be able to be a part of it and help them purchase, these stainless steel tanks that now they're going to be able to use season after season. And the quality of their coffee has improved significantly. And so they're able to charge every single person now that buys that coffee like 50 cents more per pound. And that's a huge change for them. That money can go back to, supporting their employees, building into the future of their farm, and of course, investing in their own family. So I think it's small changes like that, and I hope we do more and more as time goes on. And then in Saskatchewan, I think I'd hope that we have made an impact in the business community and in the nonprofits around us. We do partner with a number of different organizations. Even when COVID hit here, we've been often going out in the community, dropping off freshly brewed coffee to organizations that are just working around the clock. Whether it's Aid Saskatoon or the hospital. We try and just be a part of the community and just be a friend, that classic like cheesy kindergarten thing, treat people how you want to be treated. We've tried to do that here, and I hope that shines through in our partnerships across the province.
Well, thank you for doing what you're doing and be an example to other young women. You've been recognized for this, Her Turn winner in 2019, a national business competition, the WESK Innovation Award in 2019. These are all things that you are, in a sense, you win, but you give back.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It's such a privilege being a part of the business community in Saskatchewan and Canada. We have such an opportunity here to make local impacts and international impacts. And I find Canadian entrepreneurs are just so friendly and willing to help each other. And it's just an amazing community to be a part of.
I couldn't agree more. Alisha Esmail, CEO of Saskatoon-based Draude Coffee. Again, congratulations. Continue doing what you're doing. And we'll be back in just a moment with more on women and entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much.
We're talking about women in work, women at work, women in politics. We have with us a couple of women who know what they're talking about. Prabha Mitchell, CPA, she is now the CEO of WESK, that is Women Entrepreneurs of Saskatchewan, to take a look at all the issues there. Also with us, June Draude, former longtime politician in this province of Saskatchewan, was the first person to put forward a social impact bond in Saskatchewan, I think in Canada. She started out as a farm kid and had 5 kids and then got into politics. The stories are really interesting, but I just want to start with, where are we? It's 2020 and we're still talking about separate women's organizations and whether women can succeed in business or whether women can succeed in politics. Really? Prabha?
Well, we've come a long way, but there's a lot more to do yet. So women entrepreneurs, Women start businesses almost at the same rate as men, but women don't achieve scale to the same extent. So an example, a male-owned business is 3.5 times more likely to reach $1 million in revenue. And there is a case to be made. And when I talk about this, I talk about the economic case, because this is, yes, about gender equality and equity, but there is an economic contribution and a great economic benefit that comes from supporting women start a business and grow a business. Advancing gender equality can add another 150 to 420 billion to the economy. So when women are trying to grow their business, they're encountering barriers like lack of access to capital, rejection rates are higher, lack of access to mentors, to networks, because...
But that's the kind of thing I'm asking about. Like, why would an angel investor or a bank or anybody else say, oh boy, I don't trust you, you're a woman, I'm not sure I want to invest in you? There is a track record.
Well, that mindset still exists. I think we're shifting it, but we call that unconscious bias. So example, when an investor is investing in a female-owned business, the kinds of questions she's asked is, what are you going to do about managing loss? Well, a male founder is asked questions around growth trajectory, profit. And it's not necessarily intentional sometimes, it's unconscious bias that prevails across the ecosystem, right? So it's time for us to get to that. Here's what I think is optimistic and hopeful is that we're having these conversations much more than we have ever had in the past. And I think that is a great start.
June, because it's women in business, but women in politics, it's the same thing. We're still talking in 2020 about there's a disadvantage to women who try to get into politics. Parties don't encourage them. Maybe there's not the same funding. Was that the case for you?
You know, at the very beginning, I was really upset when people called me a woman politician.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a politician who happened to be a woman.
Right.
I want to say that first. I don't want everybody to look at me and see that I was a woman. It bothered me that when we started the Saskatchewan Party, I was the woman, and they called me a token woman. I think there was 7 token men, but actually it's just not right. And the conversations around the table have to be different now, because I do bring a different perspective, but it's what we need to have a good balance. And when things work, I think you'll see it's like in a family. Everybody's perspective counts and it matters. I think today there are more women that are thinking about politics, but at the same time, politics isn't really for the faint of heart in most cases. So
right.
that you can probably do, fulfill your dreams in another way. But somebody like Prabha is so important when it comes to women that can fulfill their dreams in the economy or just be themselves. To talk to women who are successful in whatever realm of life, you need the same things. And that conversation is so important.
So when you're having these conversations with other women, a group of women entrepreneurs, how do you reach out to that male community, the funding community, the banking community, the political community, and say in pretty plain language, stop asking different questions, stop asking dumb questions? Can you say that?
I don't know if I'd say stop asking dumb questions, but I would say to them, let's have a different conversation.
Yeah.
And so we did something radical in 2000. I started this role in 2014, and 2015 or 16, we did something quite radical at that time, and maybe even today. We opened up the organization to men, and men could become associate members, not regular members. Mm-hmm. They couldn't vote at an AGM, but they could be associate members. And people were just horrified that we could do this, but there was a rationale behind that. We can't advance gender equality without having men participate in that equation, and they need to be our champions.
That's always been true. This is why when you segregate in that way and say, okay, it's a women-only organization, here are our issues, but you're dealing in a predominantly male world still.
So what we've done to address that issue, and it's a great point, is we deliberately and carefully recruit male champions. Yeah. So when we created the Saskatchewan Advisory Committee, endorsed by the government of Saskatchewan, to look at how women can scale their businesses in our province, we try to bring in 2 influential men male entrepreneurs into that onto that committee. But I think that's how we can change the game, is to engage men very strategically and actually carefully choose who they are. We need influential men to talk about equality.
Is it the same two guys that show up because their minds have already been changed or they've been convinced?
I think it's the two guys that show up need to make an impact, and they need to talk to their friends and their colleagues, and then we need to have a bit of a domino effect. So I think we need committed men that can speak to other people and make that pool much larger than it is today.
And say it's not so scary. They actually can add and subtract, and women can run a business?
Absolutely. I think, the way we're going to get mass appeal and broad appeal and buy-in is to make that economic case. So we did a study and we found out that women entrepreneurs contributed $23.1 billion to our economy in 2019. I will use that stat to talk to men about why they need to be engaged in this conversation.
Yeah. June, cast your mind back. Mother of 5, running some businesses locally in small towns in Saskatchewan. What was it that drew you? What was your motivation for taking on what would have been pretty difficult at that point, becoming a candidate?
I think that you can see opportunities in this, in a small town, and in my life, they just seem to come. But maybe I had an open mind, thinking about what could be happening. But my kids and were a big part of that too, because they were proud of me. Probably still are, but they were proud, and they were champions, and you need that support. My husband was too, but there's something about having a family around you that says, "Yay, Mom, what did you do today, Mom?" And then go out and talk to your neighbors. Being a woman boss, I think is maybe different. I know the first time I had to actually let somebody go.
Right.
That was a really tough thing for me. I didn't sleep the night before. By the time I had this young man sitting in front of me explaining why it didn't work, he left. We were both crying, but he was hugging me and said he would come back and visit. And I know that I operated differently, but it was successfully because I was who I was, and I wasn't scared to.
And did you take that into politics too?
Definitely, I did. It wasn't easy, because people at home would say, "Don't change. We elected you because of who you are." And as soon as I got into politics, they say, "Now you have to have a tough skin."
Yeah.
Oh, I can't be who I am and still have a tough skin. So it's kind of trying to balance the two of them, and you have to be confident, and that confidence requires people who believe in you, whether it's your family or your friends, and it's really, I don't know if it's changed a lot, but I see more women now that aren't scared to take on a role or come and talk. And there was a time when people didn't really ask me any questions, and today they do. And I look at the younger generation.
You mean other young women
that's
coming?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. Now they'll talk to me. They'll ask questions that I think I didn't have the nerve to ask 25 years ago.
Or there wasn't anybody to ask.
That's probably part of it. I felt alone in lots of cases until I just spoke my mind. And then, I don't know, the men at that time were willing to listen. Often it was not in front of a microphone.
Right.
It would be something that we'd say around the table, and somebody else would get to say it out in the open. Right. But if you want to make a difference, sometimes that has to happen. But I still think the pendulum was way over to the left, and then maybe went to the right. We talked about women's issues. Sooner or later, it's got to be in the middle. It's got to be a balance, so it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, or you live in rural Saskatchewan or Toronto. It just, who's got the ideas and who's willing to work hard to make it happen.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes, as you say, you have to let others steal the idea if you just want it done. You park the ego.
At the end of the day, that's what people need to do, is decide what you want to have happen at the end of the day. And as a parent, I think often that's what we want to have happen.
I read something interesting the other day, and I want the two of you to react to this. This was someone telling a story, so I'll just quote her. This woman said, "When I asked the former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, about why countries with women leaders have fared so much better during COVID, she surprisingly pointed to this attribute of female leaders: self-doubt. She said it opens you up to listening to other people." When I first read it, I kind of went, and then as it sunk in, I went, exactly. What do you think?
Wow, that's a powerful quote. And by the way, when somebody asked me who one of the most powerful speakers I've ever listened to it's Mary Robinson, because she was at the University of Regina and you spoke at that. You know, I'm going to spin self-doubt to some extent, because it could be that women are much more open to self-reflection, much more open to recognizing what our limitations are, much more open to acknowledging those limitations and knowing that it's okay to make mistakes. So I think we come with that really good awareness and sense of our blind spots, perhaps, and not afraid to be vulnerable.
I think the other point is, I don't know a woman who is scared to take some advice. You could get advice and you could reject it, or you can listen to it, but taking some advice, that old saying where a man will drive around for 2 hours and not ask directions, whereas a woman will get out and ask somebody where this place is. That just makes sense to me, because first of all, most of us don't have time to drive around for 3 hours to find out where we're going. It's just easier to ask somebody else. So you listen to it, and then you have to have enough confidence to think, okay, I like that, I can add that to what I'm thinking, or that's silly.
Yeah, that
so
doesn't
I
work.
think you need to be able to take on the other ideas and just think about it.
And I think also we maybe are, you know, I don't know how to explain this, but we're much more responsive in the sense that we don't have a stance that's fine. I mean, that, you know, we're flexible, right? So we are able to respond to the environment maybe faster, quicker. We don't kind of say, this is my stance and I'm not going to shift. So
well, I think guys have had a difficulty with that because they have been in the CEO role or the boss role for a lot of years, and you kind of have to take a position and hold to it because, you know, you're going to be seen as weak.
Yes.
Whereas we've come in a different way, so not held to the same bar, upside and downside to that.
And the pandemic has created uncertainty. So we don't know where we are from day to day, right? So you need that flexible mindset, and I think perhaps women bring that.
There's another quote I'm just thinking of, and I was remembering having a conversation with Alan Alda. I don't know if he said it or whether he was quoting somebody, but he just said listening is the ability to be changed by the other, which is just another way of being open-minded, being able to take it in without it being seen as a threat to your position or to the job or to your male decisiveness or whatever it may be, that we do seem to be a little bit more willing to roll with it a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe it's part of who we are as women, and in my days.
And mothers and wives and all.
In my days, that was the job that I did at home. And that was what you did 50 years ago. Now I know it's changed quite a bit, where men are more involved in, but you have to be flexible. You just didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow if you have 5 children
on a farm and
it hails, life is going to change.
Yeah.
So I think that the strong aren't always what we used to think was the strong one, somebody who made up their mind and this is what they're doing. No, that's not that strong.
When you talk about COVID and how that's changed, you hear a lot of, obviously a lot of the responsibility is still on women in the household when people say who's doing the at-home education, or what if the daycares don't open, women will have to stay home. But the roles are changing a little bit. So are we far enough down the road that we have the confidence or the ability to say, you know what, we can play that mother role or that stay-at-home role, or take the hit at the front end because maybe our husband will take it at the... Are we there yet? I used to always think this, that when women could be fired for being incompetent, we would have actually reached equality, as opposed to being fired because they're women, right? And they're the first ones in. We're looking for a different standard by which to play all of these particular scenarios out.
So I'll give you an example from my work experience. If you ask me to list the 10 most successful women entrepreneurs in Saskatchewan, the one attribute that they have in common is they all have very strong partners who support them 100%. And that means sometimes taking responsibility for sort of the personal,
Kids,
home, all of that. And they will speak to it and say that's the reason they were able to go and give this 250%, which is what it takes to be successful. So I think as we share those stories and as we hear those stories, I think that will inspire men perhaps to say they can step in or step up. And that's part of the work we're talking about when we're talking about the awareness campaign through this advisory committee. Is it's almost like a movement where you want to have the men say, hey, I want to be with her, so I'm going to step in and step up so she can go out and be successful, right? So it's really a bit of a culture shift and a mind shift, but I'm optimistic that we'll get there.
I think that as we move forward, one of the ways to reach young women, young girls, is at the school. And I think the school system right now would maybe welcome opportunities, or should be asked, if you can't have speakers. And they have different groups of people coming in all the time. But if they have women business owners saying, yes, it can be you. Not why me, it's why not you? Yeah. And I think that to have somebody come in and say, look what I've done, this is where I started, this was the odds against me at that time, and now I have this.
Role models.
Do you think the younger generation, though, actually, I find in conversation with my nieces, and that they don't understand the barriers that were overcome to get to where we are today, and so therefore those stories of, I walked 5 miles to school in my bare feet, and all the equivalents of that, just they don't resonate. I mean, I agree they need role models. On the other hand, it's not their world. They can, from their point of view, kind of do whatever they want.
There's an interesting thing happening now with COVID. I have 2 grandchildren that are wanting to be working and can't. So they're getting EI or government checks. And they said, I don't like this. I feel uncomfortable getting the money that I didn't earn. And I thought, wow, I hope that that's happening in lots of places right now, so people understand, okay, this isn't just right. And you got to wake up in the morning and know that there's a reason to put your clothes on. Yeah. And I don't know what COVID will do right now to the majority of young people, or that are sitting at home and thinking, what's tomorrow, or is there tomorrow? I wish I could see 1 year from now and what would happen in those instances.
But it's also opening up, the ability to work at home. Like for many, that would have been a non-starter, and now we figured out that you can. So then that changes the dynamic in the home front too.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking to your point about, kids that are value-driven, like your grandchildren, versus we also hear stories on the flip side where people are taking that money and some people are not returning back to work because, they're able to collect that check. So, I think we have a little bit of both going on.
So who's going to win? What's going to happen in a year from now?
In a year from now, I guess.
I think about that at night, right?
Yeah.
What are we going to look like?
Well, we don't know, because that disincentive to work is now built in. And, it depends on when you're hitting kids, if they're just graduating or if it was their first job. Like, this could shape them in a way that it's hard to imagine.
On the other hand, we truly are going to become a global community very quickly. COVID has catapulted that use of technology. So kids could be here in Saskatchewan and be working for a company in Toronto, or maybe outside of Canada. Like, that day will likely come sooner because of what we've experienced with the pandemic. So I think there have been some things that will change, and it's like a technology fast forward because of COVID, and I think there'll be some positive changes that come out of this. While we have to deal with
I agree. I mean,
those negative things.
People have figured, then the impact is, okay, well, if I don't have to fly to Toronto to a meeting, why will I go? So that changes the economics of it as well, because some industries are going to disappear. Yeah, for sure on that one. What would both of you say, and June, I'll start with you on this one, if you had some young woman who is 18, 20, and would you say go into politics, given what we're all watching, whether it's stateside or in our own country?
if this
it's
person...
not a very appealing prospect.
I think the benefit of knowing what I do with what can happen in politics, my first instinct would be to say, I wonder why. But if you have that fire in your belly about anything, if you firmly want to do that, yes, you should. You really should be able to educate yourself and learn about it and be yourself. I've encouraged a number of people, and I've talked to a number of others and say, are you sure? Like, what does this really mean? It's not just standing in front of a microphone. What does this mean? So I think you got to know the people, but if they're interested at all, it is an unbelievable opportunity. I was the 37th woman, I was the 17th woman cabinet minister in Saskatchewan. It blows my mind that I had that huge opportunity. I come from rural Saskatchewan, and I wasn't, it doesn't seem like it should be possible. It is possible, and I think that in my way I made a difference, and I think everybody can. So I would say yes, you should do whatever your heart is set on and whatever you feel so strong about you can't stop.
But you also know, because we all watch it all day long, that careers and individuals are torn down and torn apart in our media world today. I mean, It's the same with business leaders. It's the same in politics. It's a nasty game.
It is.
And
you can't be scared of it, because it's still the best one we have. It's still the best opportunity we have to make a difference in not just in our own little world, but in our province and maybe our country. And if you feel that strongly about it, and you can work hard. I know it's scary. I'm glad that I didn't have a Facebook page 25 years ago.
Right.
But I don't know. I just believe in people, and I believe there's got to be somebody standing in there who represents me. And that person who wants to come and talk to me and ask my opinion, then I think that person could represent me. And if it's a young woman, I'm really glad.
It's the same in business, Prabha. I mean, everybody has their ethical issues. We watch it, sometimes they're real, sometimes they're not, because with things like cancel culture, we mow somebody down and then ask the questions later, right? We've seen it just in the last couple of weeks. So that's also a downside. That's something that has to be taken into account when you're encouraging people to do this. Is that part of the conversation, which is, yes, it's one thing to have the support of your family and to have men as mentors and investors have confidence in you, but it's also rough and tumble.
Yeah, it is. In business it is, and starting and scaling your business is a tough game. I think what I find, and actually I want to go back to what June was saying, being the 17th female politician in the province, cabinet minister. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and in my mind, June is one of those pioneers in our province because she had the courage to take that risk. I do think that women in politics will influence dramatic change, and we're seeing that to some extent, right, at the federal level and the provincial level. So I think we need to take that risk, whether it's in business or politics. I think women are much more bold in sort of taking that risk now than ever before. Women are also very resilient. So I think they will start a business. It's tough. The competition's tough. Surviving is tough. But I'm finding that grit. And grit is a combination of determination and passion. And that's what I'm seeing in our women entrepreneurs, is that grit to make it and to drive that change. And we talk about lifestyle entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship that's really, where you have that grit and you want to be successful. And I think women are very consciously and deliberately making those choices now.
Yeah. Senator, I think that another part of that I think about right now is it would be really hard right now to be a policeman.
Exactly.
With everything that's happening.
Right.
And yet there are still young people that are choosing to do that, and their parents are supporting them. And it's not an easy life. I don't think there are any easy lives, but that's one that stands out for me right now. But if your child would ask you if they should go in to be an RCMP officer, I don't think you'd say no. but in your heart you probably would be scared.
You'd be worried for them,
So
for sure.
I think it's all of it. It's, you've got to follow what your dream is, and it's easy, or it's not easy. It's never easy, but as long as you believe in yourself and you have people that'll support you to do that, then you got to go for it.
Yep.
So what would be the definition of success, Prabha? When do you want to say, okay, I think women are getting a fair shot at this, and we don't need this organization anymore because people are just doing it?
I think the day that WESK does not have to exist, in my mind, we've succeeded, because our vision as WESK is a province in which our vision says, a province in which all entrepreneurs have the opportunity to succeed and be recognized. We don't have gender in our vision statement because it should not really be about a woman entrepreneur. It should be an entrepreneur, not a female leader, a leader, right? And that is really that's the dream. That should be the dream in our country.
In politics, like you don't want to be that woman politician.
I don't want to be a woman politician. I want to be a politician. And somebody, if I'm wearing a mask, you might not know what I am. and it'll be, that would be the answer. And that's when the world will work.
But there is something I do want to say before we wrap up, because I'm an immigrant, and I moved to Canada in 1985. So I've been here this is home. And I think if that can happen in any country, it would be Canada, because I think we have the values, the spirit, to make that vision happen. And maybe it's just I'm a proud Canadian, but I do think that if it can happen in any country, it's our country.
We also been, regardless of I've been having conversations with people most of my life professionally, but you do find some of the themes come up when you talk about Saskatchewan. Now we're biased because we're here and it's home and all of those things, but is there something particular here about that grit, about that spirit, about that ability to, as you were saying, June, you've got 5 kids on the farm and then it hails, like you have to get up and go at it again the next day regardless of the fact that there's no crop and no income. Is there something particular about here that allows that spirit, or are we just being home cheerleaders here?
Because I was born here and I've never really left, it's hard for me to say. I know we talk about if you can survive -40 and mosquitoes, then you are doing really
tough.
well. I just can't imagine not doing it, because I've grown up knowing my neighbors and seen them as my friends. I don't know what it's like from the perspective of choosing to come to a different country, but even now with the way Saskatchewan has grown, we still act like you're my family, even though I don't really know you. And I hope that's the way Prabha feels. Maybe that's why she thinks we'll succeed.
Did you come directly to Saskatchewan, or were there other stops in Canada?
So I was in a marriage, arranged marriage. That's what brought me to Canada. So I didn't really choose to come here, but I moved to Toronto, Waterloo. When I first started, when I first moved to Canada, and then moved to Saskatchewan. Like I was in Ontario, Manitoba, and then Saskatchewan since 2001. I love Saskatchewan, and I think I would go back to what June says, is that sense of community I've not seen anywhere else. And I've been to every province in Canada, but that level of comfort, the few degrees of separation, which can be a strength and a weakness, that sense of community. You can go and talk to anybody you want to in a province. You can pick up the phone and you want to meet with somebody, you get that meeting, right? And it's very unique. The people and community. That's what I think Saskatchewan puts first, is the community and people.
You came here in an arranged marriage, and then what were you doing? Did you have a job? Did you have a career?
I went to school. I was very young.
Yeah.
Then I got married. I was like a teen. So I went to university, got my undergraduate degree and then my master's, and then we moved to Manitoba, and then my ex-spouse's job brought us to Saskatchewan.
Okay, so now an ex-spouse. So that's because that's even that concept in 2020 is foreign. It's not that foreign really when you think about it, because even in small towns, who are you going to marry? The people you know. Who are you going to meet? The people you work with, right? It is kind of a small world any way you look at it.
Yeah.
But when you look back on that, it must seem strange.
It was strange. It was tough, lonely. I didn't have a language barrier because I went to convent schools in India, but you're isolated because you don't have your family, you don't have your networks. You didn't have cell phones, right, then?
Right.
So you can't call home. I used to write letters to my family. Probably took weeks to get there. It was very tough, lonely. Wouldn't change anything, though.
Yeah.
I'm here talking to you today
Yes, here you
because
are.
of all of that.
It seems like it sounds a bit like a farm wife, isolated, lonely,
And
no
you know-
cell phones, nowhere to go.
My mom was a war bride, and I spent most of my grown-up years waiting for the look on her face when she got a letter from home, which was England. And the packages that would come from England. And I didn't know it, but I watched my mom. And I thought, how different it is. I felt my grandma, I can walk a half a mile down the road and see my grandma. And that's something that I think I took it for granted for a while, but I don't now because my own family is spread out more. And so I wish I would never have taken rural Saskatchewan for granted.
Right.
But it's good to have a conversation like this because it brings to mind what we take for granted.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a little bit what living through COVID is making us reevaluate what matters. And that is going to shape a very different world and a very different.
Absolutely.
Thank you both. No, go ahead, June. What were you going to say?
It's a great opportunity in our province, in the world, and to sit here and to talk to you and to know that this is, there might be people listening that have never even been to Saskatchewan.
Right.
Probably can't even say it. but this is where dreams are built. I really believe it.
Yeah, I know people are going to think we're kind of nutty when they hear this stuff, this cheerleading, but it is an interesting place. It really is, and it's small but the dreams are big. It's very true. Thank
I
you.
think people only understand Saskatchewan when they come visit Saskatchewan. So I don't think people understand what we share as commentary about Saskatchewan. But anytime people from the East come into Saskatchewan and visit, they sort of get a sense of the spirit and the culture.
Do you think we really are a country divided? That the West doesn't understand where the East doesn't understand us and vice versa?
I think we could work a little more at uniting the country.
But what level does that happen at? Who does that?
Governments.
Yeah.
I think we are getting divided, and it makes me sad. And I do think it's governments, and it's policies in lots of cases, and it's politics. And politics, like you said at the beginning, can be a nasty world. But we're the people. Like I hope everybody feels as happy to see the Canadian flag as I do. But I still, you say Ontario, Quebec, and you think they don't know how I feel, which makes me sad. But and I think it's getting a little worse right now with COVID.
Yeah, and I think we got to build bridges rather than have adversarial conversations because that's not helping our country.
Well, we're having that conversation, and it's happening on every stage, which is we're defining what's different about us.
Yeah.
I'm a woman, you're a man, I'm black, you're white. I'm not sure that that's a helpful way. That's why I always react when there's women politicians or a group for women entrepreneurs. It's one more distinction that separates us, but you two are trying to find the bridges back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.